The case of Garry Newlove, the 12th of August 2007, Cheshire. Garry was a hard-working family man who lived with his wife and 3 daughters. They lived in Warrington, Cheshire, a residential area with a subway at one end of Garry's Road. It had its usual group of teenagers. Like every location, it had its positives and its negatives. As time went on, the party of teenagers around the area became more rowdy, predominantly hanging around the subway at the end of Garry's Road. A lot of the residents felt the police were not taking enough interest in tackling the rising issues with the teenagers and the substances they were clearly taking. Neighbours noticed the littering of alcoholic bottles, the use of drugs and the disturbances the clique were making in and around the area. This was increasingly infuriating the local community, especially those who lived on the same road as Garry, with the subway at the end. The police were doing nothing to counter this antisocial behaviour. They would just note down the damage of property or the interactions with these aggressive juveniles, and nothing was ever actually done. Helen, Garry's wife, and a neighbour would go to police for meetings about the goings-on in their area. At one of these meetings, she recalls the gang of youths banging on the windows and the police did literally nothing. She turned to her neighbour Eric and said it would take a murder for the police to take us seriously. These events continued: cars and property damage, burning of the property, the littering of bottles, the drugs, the antisocial behaviour. It just kept getting worse, and so did the aggression of these youngsters hanging around at the subway. On the day of August 10th, 2007, the group of hooligans were hanging around a local park, drinking large amounts of alcohol. They were actually dispersed by the police, having the alcohol taken away from them. But they were not monitored, so the mostly underage gang simply went on and bought more alcohol and continued causing havoc. They went on to punch a teenager, chasing a group of lads and catching up with one who was disabled and then beating him down. They then headed to the local pub where a lot of youths were already situated. Adam Swellings, the 18-year-old proclaimed ringleader, actually had just been released on bail at lunchtime on the same day, but continued to cause mayhem regardless. It just shows how little he respected the police, and just how much of a joke he took them for, as clearly they did nothing to counter his disruptive behaviour, even when he has just been released on bail. It was an average Friday night at the Newlove household. The daughter Zoe was at work, Helen was unwell, so in bed, leaving Garry and his 2 other daughters, Danielle and Amy, to watch the telly. Meanwhile, the gang were making their way up the road towards the subway, smashing car lights. They then kicked Helen's car. Hearing smashed glass, Garry went to check what was happening outside his home. Once outside, Garry saw the damage to his wife Helen's car and asked them who did this. They laughed, they mocked him and started swearing at him. They then began circling him. From behind, Adam Swellings punched Garry, and then the rest begin to attack Garry, kneeing him so he falls to the floor and continuing to kick him in the head. Zoe, Garry's daughter, returned home from work with her boyfriend and they tried to get in between, but the disgusting yobs relentlessly continued their beating. There is nothing Zoe, Danielle or Amy could do, as the members kicked Garry in the head a total of 14 times. A gang member Sultan kicked Garry so hard he lost his shoe underneath him. Garry was left with 40 internal injuries. After Garry stopped fighting back and stopped moving, the teenagers moved on to get some dinner at a fish and chip shop, as Danielle, Zoe and Amy were left with their dying father. Garry is sent to hospital but is in a coma. A violent kick to the back of his head caused a brain hemorrhage. Garry had beaten stomach cancer before, and he had stood up to the relentless and foul teenagers, but unfortunately, the brain hemorrhage was fatal. After Garry's passing, the police gear into action to seek members who were drunk and drugged up that night, looking to identify the usuals who hang around that subway. They stopped Stephen Staunton and noticed he was missing a shoe. He said the shoe fell off when he was running, but he was arrested regardless. Door-to-door stops, help from the public and eyewitness statements helped the police identify the members. The eyewitnesses named 4 to 5 lads as the main culprits. In addition to Sorton, arrested was Adam, 18, and Jordan, aged just 15 years old, as well as 2 others that were not named. Evidence used to show their guilt was PCSO statements, CCTV footage, forensic and physical evidence. All 5 stood in the docks laughing and not caring about what was happening or what they had done. It was one of the most obnoxious and evil displays of arrogance in a court. Garry's daughters had to give statements. It is just unimaginable to stand in court and give statements of your father's murder while the defendants laughed and joked, yet the daughters were told to show no emotion as it could affect the jury's decision. The sentences were given. 3 teenagers were found guilty of murder. 19-year-old Swellens was cold, 17-year-old Stephen just gazed, and now 16-year-old Jordan, the Joker, suddenly burst into tears. 2 other teenagers, aged 15 and 17, were cleared by the jury of murder and manslaughter. It was a relief to get the murder convictions, but 2 being cleared did not feel like complete justice to Garry's family and friends. After the sentencing, Helen, Garry's wife, felt that there was a clear lack of support for victims of crime, and this inspired her to keep Garry's name alive and make changes to tackle this. This did not have to end in murder. If only the police listened to Helen, to the other residents, and did something about this antisocial behaviour. Even when the worst happened, Helen felt like Garry's family, the victims of this case, were not supported. They were treated less than the defendants. These gang-like murders were one of many at the time, which put a spotlight on the youths and the rise of antisocial behaviour in the UK. Helen actively campaigned through the media for more support for victims of crime and for more severe sentences. She works with communities to reduce antisocial behaviour, going into schools to speak of the effect of underage drinking and drugs. Helen, now a baroness due to all her campaigning and hard work, set up Newlove Warrington in 2008, which was to make the town safer, to create opportunities for children and build better facilities for the youths in the area. Baroness Newlove took a seat at the House of Lords as Victims Commissioner, helping work with the government on changes to support victims of crime. She is currently the Deputy Speaker in the House of Lords. Helen is an incredibly strong woman. She has helped many victims. She has helped make major changes in the UK's binge drinking culture and facilitate methods of countering antisocial behaviour, which is shown by her career since. She still now strives for change, working with the University of Bolton and in the House of Lords. I and many others have nothing but respect for the work she has done and is still doing to make changes. It's because of this that Garry will never be forgotten, and his legacy lives on through her. Thank you for listening. Until next time.